First of all, we're going to talk about why resumes and cover letters are important. I'm going to then run through just some typical do's and don'ts. So things that we may have seen on resumes a long time ago, but aren't really best practice currently and in Australia. Where then I'm going to run through what I believe is sort of a best practice structure. And this will apply to you if you're in like year 10 and you're just starting to apply for some part-time jobs, or if you're at university and applying for graduate programs or internships. So the structure that we use really doesn't change across, all those different stages of your career. It's really just the content that will go into those sections that will change. I'm also going to talk to you about how you can tailor your resume to different positions. And this is going to become even more important as you pursue your career and start to really want to specialize in different areas. And that's about really being able to understand what are the key skills and competencies required to do that role, and then trying to match that on your resume. We're also going to just talk about different resources that you can use to help you with your resume writing, and then hopefully we'll have some question time at the end. So first of all, what do hiring managers and recruiters look for in a resume? Does anyone want to pop into the chat what you feel that a hiring manager or recruiter might be looking for when they are reviewing resumes? So if you can just put what you think what they would be looking for into the chat, that would be great. What I'm seeing in the chat box is, first of all, standout information. Yes. A succinct 1 to 2 page resume. Yes, definitely for people at an early stage of their career. We definitely don't want a really long resume. Volunteering, internships, previous employment, definitely. Whether you fit the certain criteria, most definitely. Information about yourself and past experiences. Excellent, thank you. So I guess what I would say is that when recruiters are looking at resumes, you do need the information to stand out. And a lot, particularly when it comes to graduate employment or internships, they might be looking at hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of resumes for a small number of jobs. So you do really want your resume to be visually attractive, because recruiters are going to be reviewing those resumes on their computers. So years ago when I worked in recruitment, everything was printed out. Now they obviously view everything online. So I would recommend having, a nice clean template. I'm going to talk about a bit more about templates in a minute, but nice clean templates that have some bold headings and some bullet points, and so that certain keywords will actually jump off the page and catch their attention. So I'm going to show you some sort of templates that I would recommend that you could use going forward. The perfect resume. So first of all, there is no such thing as a perfect resume. Resumes will vary from industry to industry, from country to country, and from, depending on your level. So as I said before, I think what is important that your resume is relevant for the level of role that you are applying for, and in the country that you are applying for. And obviously what I'm going to talk to you about today is sort of what I believe is best practice in Australia right now. Okay, so these are some probably some don'ts that things that you don't want to include in your resume. So the first thing I would say is that you don't need a photo in your resume. Okay, I still do see resumes coming through with photos, but it really isn't necessary. The photo will go in your LinkedIn profile. And in the next session that I run in August, 4th of August, we're going to be focusing on building a LinkedIn profile. So keep your photo for LinkedIn, unless, of course, you are going for a job where they actually ask you to have a photo, which would be very rare, I think, unless you're going for a modeling photo, a modeling job or something like that. So no need for the photo. In terms of your personal details, really just name, suburb, postcode, your phone number, your email address, and your LinkedIn URL is all that you need to put in terms of your personal details. In the past, my first mission, which was quite a long time ago, we would have put in our birth date, our driver's license, possibly even, religion, and think marital status and things like that. And in some countries that is still something that they do, but not in Australia. And I would always be really careful if you have been very heavily involved in some, political parties or student movements that could be a little bit, I guess, contentious. I would just, veer on the side of caution and just perhaps leave things off that, perhaps other people might have strong opinions about. So I think it's always, try and only put in things there that will be fairly safe. The other thing is, and this is probably more important as you become more experienced, but you don't need to have a list of every job that you've ever done. So often I will still see, lists of jobs that people had in high school or just out of high school, but they're well into their 30s and have had quite a number of permanent corporate roles. So as our career progresses, we start to take off our earlier jobs that were less important. But if you are just starting out, it's great to have even some babysitting work, that you might have done some volunteer work at school, like any sort of experience at all, I would include. And then as your career progresses, you start to remove things that aren't as relevant anymore. In terms of education, I think, most people, it's high school onwards. So really primary school, even if you've won awards for the maths competition at primary school, or, if you were school captain, you could maybe leave that on, but pretty much anything else from primary school is probably not necessary to include on your resume. Some resumes or some jobs, they will actually ask you to include the details of your referees. And for people who don't know what a referee is, that basically means it's a reference. So basically, you often, if you are applying for a job, the person that is recruiting you may want to speak to two people that you have done some work with before. So again, if you're applying for a job to work at Coles or to work in a bakery, if you've done some babysitting work or some admin work for a family friend or something like that, then you would provide their details. Obviously, you would always ask them first if they're happy to provide you with a reference, and you would then provide the company with those details so that they can call them and just check that you are reliable and a good worker. But you don't necessarily need to put their personal details on the actual resume. Now, one thing that I noticed, particularly with a lot of younger people, is that they are using very, what I would say, sort of heavily designed resume templates. And I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like in a minute. This is what I mean by a document that is heavily designed. So hopefully you can see on this document. So you can see here that this is actually a template that it looks like graphically, visually, I should say, it looks beautiful. And this is a template that a lot of people download from Canva. So Canva, I assume most of you know what Canva is. You can download, thousands and thousands of different templates for different things. And they do have a big range of resumes available. However, you need to be really careful with these templates. And even if you are working in design or wanting to get into design, still be really careful with using this sort of template. And the reason is that for most big corporate companies these days, they use what Linda was referring to at the beginning of this coaching session. They use these systems that are called applicant tracking systems, or they're often shortened to an ATS. And what this means is that basically when you apply for a job, that your resume goes through this system and is screened out against keywords. So probably 25% of the resumes will be seen by a human out of, the 100% that apply. The problem with these types of templates is they're not what we say ATS friendly. So there's no guarantee that the applicant tracking system will be able to read things like this, particularly where you've got little graphs and little cool icons, which some of these templates have. So I would recommend that you probably use a more, simple one-column template that will be easily read by the applicant tracking system. Now, if you are applying for an internship and it's someone that you know, and you know that your resume is going direct to their email address, then that's a little bit different. You could probably be a little bit more creative. But if you're applying through Seek and it's a competitive process, then I would sort of steer clear of these types of templates. So I hope if anyone has any questions about that, you can certainly ask me about that at the end. First thing we want to do when we are looking to apply for a job is to really study the role. Obviously, a lot of the time we just see an advertisement. So in that advertisement, it is looking for keywords to really give you a sense of what they're looking for in a candidate. So for example, if there were words around being a team player or being collaborative or having initiative, I'd be sort of writing down those words and making sure that you're using similar language in your resume. So if it's possible, like I would always request a position description if you think that there might be one available. In a lot of cases, they don't have a position description, particularly if it's more like a casual job. But as you become more experienced, particularly sort of university jobs and beyond, I would always ask for as much information as you can so that you can really tailor your resume. So what you want to be looking for is to understand what we call the key selection criteria. And so key selection criteria is basically what you need to do this job. And that will usually include some technical skills. So it might be computer skills, IT, software skills, data analysis, etc. But it also might mean soft skills. And so soft skills are things like teamwork, initiative, resilience, leadership, problem solving. So it's really important to go through the advertisement and really sort of try and spot the things that they're looking for and then try and match that in your resume. Obviously, you want to look at if there's certain qualifications they're looking for. I would also always go to the website of the company and look at their values. So most companies these days have values. So values might be respect, integrity, diversity and inclusion. So things like that. And again, by including some of that type of language in your cover letter or your resume, it shows that you've really done your research, that you've really found out what this company is all about, what sort of people do they employ, and what sort of behaviours do they expect in their organisation. So make sure you always look at the values and really just have a think about, well, what would be the day-to-day challenges in this role? So for example, any job in retail, customer service, hospitality, you are dealing with the public. And these types of jobs are such great entry-level jobs because you will develop really, really good skills. And in those jobs, the challenges will be things like problem solving, dealing with customer complaints, maybe managing some conflict if a customer's upset that their bread's stale or something like that. So it's, being able to adapt your communication to people from different backgrounds and cultures. So those sorts of jobs, it's really worthwhile thinking about, well, what would be the typical challenge in this role? And then again, trying to address that in your cover letter and in the resume where you've had similar experience. Okay, so then I want you to sit down and really just brainstorm all the reasons why you think you would be a good match to the job. So it might be certain skills that you feel you've developed at school or through other part-time jobs or volunteer work. It might be something, what you're studying and how that relates to this role or this company. Certain strengths that you have, so things that you feel you do particularly well, values that are the values of the company that are aligned to your values, and just generally your enthusiasm and passion for working in this area or for that particular organization. So for example, if you were applying for a job with Coles, I would read up on the website and really think about, what are the great things that Coles are doing for the community? What are their values that resonate with you? So even though it might be just sort of a part-time casual job, think about, I guess, what it is about that brand and that organization that would make you want to work for them. And that's how you can really stand out compared to other candidates. As you progress with your career, there's some, I guess, resources that you can use to help you with your resume. And the first would be any type of job description that you have been given for a job that you've had in the past. And so using the job description, or even a job description that you find online, if you haven't been given one, you will have already sort of a really good base to write what your responsibilities were in that role. So for example, if you have worked as a retail assistant, for example, even if you haven't been given a position description, you can go online and you could Google retail assistant position description and find some really good descriptions and language that you can include in your resume. If you've had any type of work or any internships where you've had a performance review, so basically performance review means you sit down with your manager and they tell you hopefully all the good things that you've done and maybe things you need to improve on. Anything that you get feedback on that you do really well, you can use that. You can think that, well, there's some of my strengths or perhaps some of my achievements that I can include in my resume as well. Any training courses that you've done, whether it's at school, whether it's at university, in addition to your formal study, you can obviously include that in a sort of professional development section on your resume. And of course, any awards that you have been awarded for academic, music, sport, anything that is extracurricular should always be in your resume. And I know from experience, graduate recruiters, they're looking for much more than just great academics. I would say in most cases, they look for solid academics. In many companies, it's credit average and above that would be your cutoff. Some companies, it would be distinction average, where it's a very competitive process. But a lot of companies just want well-rounded kids, or well-rounded graduates. So that means reasonable academics, but also showing that you've had some part-time work, which is really, really important. Particularly anything that is customer facing will always be very highly regarded. Any work, volunteer work or community work, any obviously sport, music, debating. So anything that is extracurricular that you can include in your resume is going to be looked on favorably. And as I said to some of the parents of the year 10, 11, 12 kids earlier this week, you want to try and make sure you're continuing those extracurricular activities after school. Because often we see that kids from private schools, they have all these amazing opportunities at school, but then they drop things when they go to university, and then they don't have these great examples of teamwork or leadership that they have had at school that they can talk about when they get to their graduate interviews. So these websites are also some really good websites that you can use to try and identify the skills that you can include in your resume. So Job Outlook is a great careers website in general, but it also has a really great skills section where you could put in a job that you have had. So it might be receptionist, and it will actually spit out and tell you all the skills that you should have from doing that job. So that is a really great little, part of that website that I really like. Skills You Need is another really good website, and Mind Tools is another one. So check out these websites, and this will help you identify what we call the sort of transferable skills that you can then take from one job to the next. Then I'm going to show you what I would, how I would structure a graduate resume. So this would be what I would suggest would be a recommended front page for your resume. So what you can see on this resume, first of all, you can see the personal details at the top. Again, just the basics. The next section is what we call a career profile. And this is a really little, 1 to 2 paragraph summary that basically is a snapshot of your experience to date. If you are a graduate, you could also put in a career objective in there. If you are someone who is more further along in your career, we would remove the career objective. But when you are first starting out in your career, it's okay to say that you are seeking an opportunity or an entry-level role in this industry so that you can develop skills in X, Y, and Z. Now, your career profile, and this applies actually to your whole resume, your whole resume should be written in third person. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know what that means we don't have any personal pronouns. So you can see here the career profile starts off with an innovative and consumer focused graduate, rather than I am an innovative and consumer focused graduate. So it's just this sort of preferred way of writing resumes. LinkedIn is first person. So LinkedIn, we write as if we have written it. I am a career coach with experience in X, Y, and Z. So there's sort of two key differences between resume and cover letter. The next section, you could call it professional attributes. Sometimes I call it key skills and attributes. And again, this section, you can tailor it however you prefer, but I would always include some sort of skills and attributes section that explains the skills that you have that you believe will match this particular job. Okay, so this particular graduate, she had quite a lot of experience working in retail. She'd also done some work in a publication. So her experience, like her communication skills, were really quite strong. She was very good at listening to customers, building trust and building rapport. So, you know, the first one we put in there was around communication. The second one was about relationship management, because in the job that she had lots of ongoing relationships. Then we talked about critical thinking and curiosity, because that was a particular criteria that was in the job that she was applying for. And then we talked about her organization and planning skills, because she is someone who's very organized. She feels that time management is really one of her strengths. And the job that she was applying for, look, any job I think that you apply for nowadays, you need to have good time management skills. So they were her more, I guess, core skills or soft skills. And then you can see we've included a section that's more about her expertise in a particular area based on her degree and some of the experience that she's had. Now, this is the section that is about is what we call having a keyword optimized section of your resume that will get through the applicant tracking system. Now, not every graduate would have this section. So marketing, digital marketing type roles and those types of courses, there's a lot of technical expertise and software and programs that you would have to learn. Similar for science, for data analysis. So you wouldn't necessarily have to always have this section in your resume. So for instance, if you are studying arts and your course is quite broad, you may not have these sort of really specific software and expertise that's specific to this industry. I would always include your education on the front page early on in your career. As you become more senior, your education might start to move to the back of your resume. So when I see more senior candidates who haven't studied maybe 10 or 15 years, we would move that to the back page of the resume. So here we've got the second and the third page of her resume. So she had done quite a bit of experience, as I mentioned, in a shop where she'd been doing some customer service and communications, but also some things in the back end around inventory and resourcing and things like that. So what you would try and do is have perhaps a responsibility section and then an achievement section, or you could just have a focus, like we've got focus and results, which is basically just saying all the things that she's done that has had an impact in her role. So typically for a graduate resume, I would just have some key responsibilities and then some achievements underneath. Now, if you can quantify your achievements, and that means, you know, putting a number to them, like a percentage, then that's always great because it shows that you have actually achieved a certain result. So for example, here, that she's done something to scale the business to respond to 400% growth in sales during COVID. Okay, so any sort of numbers that you can put in your achievements is great. But when you're first starting out in your, you know, putting a resume together for the first time, we would never expect that. So instead, you might have some achievements to say that you've built really good relationships with customers that has resulted in repeat business. You might talk about designing a new template or setting up a new template which reduced the paperwork involved in the office. So being a younger person, you might have some great little ideas around using technology that perhaps someone who's a little bit older and has been doing things sort of using more paper-based, you might be able to add value in that way. So that would be an achievement. So achievements are really any good feedback that you've had, anything that you're proud of doing, or any particular problems that you have overcome. And so you can see here the focus has been on her most recent experience, and then the other sort of employment that she's had before that, working as a swimming coach, a personal shopper, and some things like that. We didn't give as much weight to those roles because they were a little bit earlier on and less important. She's then got her volunteering work and then some extracurricular activities as well. And with references, we just put available on request. Okay, so if you have done some other additional courses in addition to your formal education, I would include a professional development section. If you are someone who is maybe studying IT or you're doing coding or data analysis, I would also include an IT/software skills section. And that would probably look a little bit like that section on the front page. And you might have all the different languages that you've had experience in, different programs that you've had some exposure to at university. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what that template might look like. And again, it will change a little bit for everyone. So your resume doesn't have to look exactly like this one. Let's just go back and talk about writing achievements on your resume, because I think this is probably one of the most difficult things that I find that people often will say to me, but I don't have any achievements to put on there. And they don't have to be things that are going to make everyone fall off the chair. You don't have to have been awarded Employee of the Month or Employee of the Year. That doesn't, it's not that sort of achievement. As I mentioned before, there's situations that you're proud of, things that you may have improved, positive feedback that you might have received from your manager or from your supervisor, or even a new idea that you've introduced. So if you are having trouble thinking of your achievements, I would always recommend sitting down with one of your colleagues or maybe a manager or a supervisor that you have worked for and ask them to help you, like ask them what they think that you have done particularly well and get some of that feedback. Because I think often when we do things well and it comes easily to us, we kind of assume that it comes easily to everyone. So getting some feedback from other people that you've worked with about, how you may have helped them may help you write your achievements up. So when you do write your achievement up, think about, well, what was the problem to start with? What did I do to fix it? And what was the outcome or the result? So we use a method, it's called the STAR method. And I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail when we get to the interview coaching session, which is at the end of the year. But the STAR method is a great way of writing your achievement. So you think about S as what was the situation? T was what was your task? So what did you need to do to fix it? A was what were your actions? And R is what was the result? And so it's a good way of, I guess, structuring what your achievement was. And then the challenge is writing that up in a fairly succinct 1 to 2 sentences. So if you could have, 1 or 2 achievements even for each job, if you've got more, that's fantastic. But basically what we want to see, and this will continue as your career progresses, you want to start having more focus on your achievements than your responsibilities. So responsibilities are sort of the day-to-day of your role. Achievements are things that you've done that are above and beyond that, and where you've had an impact in your role. So when you do write your achievements, write them when you write your responsibilities and your achievements in your employment history, you always want to write them in past tense. So as I mentioned, you can quantify them where possible. And also think about achievements that will back up the skills that you've listed on the front page of your resume. So for example, if you've said that relationship building skills as one of your top skills, one of your achievements might be that you've been successful building great relationships in the firm internally, which has resulted in X, Y, and Z. So it might have improved communication within those teams. It might have meant that because you've had great relationships with customers that they've referred business or had more repeat business. So think about the achievements that will back up the skills that you're saying that you're really good at on your resume. Now, if you can't sort of recall the details, just estimate. So if you can think of, how you've improved something, but you don't have any data or percentages, just estimate. That's probably good enough. And use the STAR method to try and sort of really structure your achievements and think about what you've done well. So these are some examples of some achievements that I've seen on some sort of graduate entry-level resumes, just to give you an idea of how you might write these. And again, it's not necessarily a big award. One of them is, I created a template to create efficiency in the accounts department, or I introduced a Dropbox folder to improve communication in the team. So it could be setting up a WhatsApp group, like all these things that people like me are really, really hopeless at doing. This is the benefit of younger people coming through organizations who are much better at using, on the whole, much better at using technology and trying to use technology to streamline things and make things easier. So hopefully that will give you an idea of the types of achievements that you could include in your resume. Now, as I mentioned before, the career summary at the front, and that's the very top section on the first page, I would actually write that section last. So I would put any jobs that you've had in, your responsibilities, your achievements, then I think about the skills that you've developed in that role. And then the last thing I would do when I write a resume is write the little career summary. And often, again, this is a part that people find difficult, but it's really just a little overview of your experience, your key strengths that you feel that you can bring to the role, and also perhaps a career objective in terms of what you're wanting to do with your career. Again, write it in third person. 1 or 2 paragraphs is enough, so it doesn't have to be really, really long. And this section so with your resume, we would hope that it stays fairly static. So it's going to take a lot of effort if you are having to rewrite your resume for every single job you apply for. So what we would hope is that this career summary at the top, you might just tweak that a little bit depending on the job. So if you're applying for a job with Carlton United Brewery or Asahi, obviously they're big corporate organizations. So your objective might be to work in a global organization or a great Australian brand where there's opportunity to rotate across different areas. On the other side, if you were applying for a job with the Cancer Council or the Red Cross, your objective might be that you would like to work in a not-for-profit doing purposeful community-based work. So it's about sort of just tweaking that little bit to show that you have tailored it a bit for that job, and that you actually understand the industry and the organization that you're applying for. So the career summary I would perhaps tweak, and also the skills section. So again, the skills might change slightly for different jobs. So you might take one skill out and add a different one in, depending on what's in the ad and in the position description, if there is a position description. Okay, so this is and again, you don't all have to have exactly the same paragraph, but I'll just leave that up there for a couple of minutes. But this would be, I guess, an example of how we might write this career summary. So I might say, here's a highly capable, hardworking, and persistent junior accountant with a background working in accounts payable and as expertise in, using Xero and QuickBooks and MYOB accounting software. So, it's, I guess, showing that, again, you're bringing in skills and specific experience that match the job. You might say that, demonstrates highly developed time management skills combined with verbal communication skills and qualifications in commerce accounting, which has resulted in proven success in X, Y, and Z. So again, look, it's written in third person. It's including some attributes and some skills. Now, the difference between attributes and skills, I get asked about this a lot. A skill is something that you have learnt usually through your study, through your work, through your volunteer work, or even in your sport or music. So it might be, a skill might be something like leadership. It might be teamwork skills, communication skills, analytical skills, problem solving skills. So it's something that you have learned through a certain experience. And a transferable skill is a skill that you can take from one job or one career to the other. So communication skills obviously is a very common transferable skill, because when I learned how to communicate with people as an accountant, I could then take that skill to work in recruitment, and then to work in project management, and now to do the coaching work that I do today. So that's a skill that I have taken across all my careers. An attribute is really more like a personal quality. So an attribute might be that I am outgoing. It might be that I am hardworking, or that I am community focused. So an attribute is often something that you are born with. It's not something that you've been taught. It's just part of your personality. So that's the difference between skills and attributes. Once you have put your resume together, I would always wait a day or so. It can take quite a bit of time to put together a resume. And as you become more senior, it takes longer and longer. So I would wait a day, I would review it. And often I think the best way of doing that is actually to read it aloud and see what it sounds like if someone else was reviewing it and reading it. So I would read it aloud. I'd always ask a friend to proofread, maybe even more than one friend. And obviously a friend who's good at English and spelling as well. So I would, you really do not want any typos or spelling mistakes in your resume. They're really not acceptable. And, I guess what happens is, if you're applying for a job, say you're applying for a job with a management consulting firm, and one of your jobs is going to be putting together PowerPoint slides for proposals and, going out to clients and doing presentations. If you have got a typo or a spelling mistake in your resume, then that pretty much sends a signal that your attention to detail is perhaps not fantastic. And, why would they hire someone like that who could have a mistake or a typo in a client presentation? So really take your time to spell check, but also proofread and get other people to proofread for you. I would always save a Word version and a PDF version. Now, when you apply, I mentioned these applicant tracking systems before. These applicant tracking systems are sophisticated enough to read PDF documents. So I would always recommend sending it as a PDF so the formatting doesn't change. Where if you send it on a Word document and someone opens it in a different format or a different program, as you probably know, the formatting can all, fall apart and it looks really bad. So I would always upload it as a PDF document. Okay, so let's talk about cover letters. So cover letters also are a very important part of the job application process. And I think there's a number of reasons why that is. You will find sometimes jobs will be advertised and they'll ask you to send a resume, and they may not specify that they want you to send a cover letter, but I would always recommend that you take that extra bit of time and that extra effort to write a cover letter. Number one, it shows that you are a professional, and it shows that you are actually taking the time to apply for this job. Often people will just send out resumes to 100 different jobs and organizations and hope that something sticks. So if you have actually taken the time to write a cover letter, you've done some research on the organisation, their services, their values, what they're doing in the community, and you can incorporate some of that into your cover letter, then you're obviously going to have, it's going to be much more highly regarded than just sending a resume. Now, not all recruiters will read the cover letter. Most will read the resume first, and then they'll look at the cover letter. I guess what I'm trying to say, often that cover letter will help them distinguish between good candidates. So when I worked in graduate recruitment at Allens, which was one of the national law firms, we would get hundreds and hundreds of applications for internships. So obviously, particularly in law, you need very highly developed written communication skills. So we would always read the cover letter in that situation. We might look at the resume first, but then the cover letter will always be read. Other jobs, if it's a job in data analysis, more of a technical skill that doesn't require writing skills, again, I would still write a cover letter, but they may not put as much weight on what's in the cover letter as a job that's in communications or law or policy or in any sort of humanities field. Always address it to the right person. And I cannot tell you the number of times when we worked in the law firm where, I worked for Allens, but I would get a cover letter that was addressed to the graduate recruiter at Freehills or Mallisons. So you need to be really careful, particularly when you're applying for internships and graduate positions where you might be applying for 30 at a time, that you get that right. Now, often in advertisements, when there's a job advertised, they won't give you the name of the person. And it's really hard to find out the name of the contact person. If that is the case, it is perfectly acceptable to write, "Dear hiring manager," "Dear recruitment manager." So if you don't know that their actual name, then it's perfectly acceptable to do that. I would always recommend keeping your cover letter to one page. Recruiters are very busy people. In fact, they say that recruiters on average will look at your resume between 6 to 10 seconds, which is not very long. So that's why you need a resume that is succinct, that has bold headings, bullet points, and words that jump off the page to catch their attention quickly. So the cover letter, they do not have time to read through 2 pages of paragraphs. So I would, again, always recommend using bold headings and bullet points in your cover letter as well to get across your key points. And I'll show you an example in a minute. Now, you always want to tailor your cover letter to the role. So as I mentioned before, your resume will mostly stay static, so it won't change that much except for tweaking that little career summary or skills section, but your cover letter will always need to be tailored to the job. Now, if you are applying for the same type of job all the time, then hopefully most of your cover letter won't change because you're talking about the skills and experience that you bring. So for example, if you're applying for 10 retail positions in 10 different shops, the only part of your cover letter that needs to change is why you want to go and work for that particular organisation. So why do you want to work for Scanlon and Theodore versus Country Road? And again, it's thinking about their brand, their values, the work that you know that they do, and why that brand resonates with you. So this would be, I guess, my recommended structure for a cover letter. So first of all, I would, opening paragraph, you might mention where you saw the job, if it was advertised on Seek, or if you saw it on their website or heard about it through someone else. And then I would write a paragraph confirming your interest in the role and that particular organisation and why you would like to work for them. I would then, you want to also include in your cover letter the relevant qualifications, skills, and experience that you feel that you can bring to the role. If you haven't really had much work experience, you might talk about skills and attributes. Okay, so things that you feel that you can bring to this job and why it's a good fit for your personality. And again, I would put it into some bullet points, get extended bullet points that will have some headings that will jump off the page and catch their attention. The final statement at the bottom, it really, again, might just confirm why you think you might be a fit for the organisation. And sorry, that little bit's cut off. And then you could say why you were available for interviews, or when you were available for interviews, and provide a phone number as well as in your contact details at the top. So I will show you an example of a cover letter. And again, just remember, they all look slightly different. But here is an example that I will bring up. Okay. So again, you can see key contact details at the top. This you would always still, well, look, in fact, like sometimes you might include the company name. These days, everything's via email. So if you are struggling to fit everything on the one page, you could remove the street address and the suburban postcode. So that isn't essential. And often because we want to fit everything into one page, we will sort of try and move things around and maybe even reduce the margin so it will fit. You don't want your font too small, but you can have it, obviously they've got to be able to read it. So first paragraph is obviously, why she's interested in the position and that she's attaching her resume for their consideration. Then explaining where she's at with her studies and how the work that she's doing would be relevant to this role. Now, if you have done something really interesting in your studies, obviously with COVID, a lot of you may not have had the opportunity to study overseas like this particular client did. But if you have had the opportunity to do anything interesting like study overseas, or you've achieved an award at university or at school, then you could include this in the earlier section of your cover letter just so that it catches their attention. I would also mention any specific work experience that you've been doing whilst you're studying, again, because that's really highly regarded by graduate recruiters. And then you can see here, this is what I mean by the bullet points. So she's saying, further value I can offer include experience working in customer service, that she's a supportive team member, that she has strong organisation and time management skills. She's got English language and Russian language skills, results focused and analytical. So again, you would customize these bullet points to the job that you are applying for. Now, if you're applying for a job in customer service, so retail, hospitality, reception, I would talk about your teamwork skills, your ability to ask the right questions and understand client issues or problems, your problem-solving skills, your client service or customer service skills. So think about, if you are in that role, what are the skills that are going to be most important? Probably time management as well. So time management is sort of one that, and teamwork, that applies across most jobs and industries. And then at the bottom here, you can see that she's mentioned the attributes, that she's dedicated, reliable, and trustworthy, and that she strives for excellence and optimal results. So look, again, every cover letter we write is completely different, but this is the structure that we use. And we use this structure for, entry-level roles, kids at uni, right through to people who are executive level. So that would be the structure that I would recommend. If you have worked for big brands, like if you've done internships with companies that are well known, it's worth worth bolding those. Again, recruiters are looking for brands that they recognize that will jump off the page. So if you have any questions about that, we can talk about that in the question time that's coming up. So I would love everyone to ask me questions if you have some. So probably the best way to do that is if we can put those in the chat. Okay, so I have a question here from Nada. Thank you. So Nada's question was, what do you think about video or PowerPoint type CVs? That's a great question. And this is one that I actually was asked just the other day. So I would say, again, there's a time and a place. If you know that your resume is being sent to someone directly, so if you're emailing it to someone directly, particularly if it's a more creative role, so, you know, perhaps marketing, advertising, where they look for creativity, then I think that's a great idea to stand out from the crowd. If you're applying through Seek or through a graduate applicant tracking system, then I'd be really careful with that, because I don't think you may not even be able to upload it. So just be really careful. It really depends on how you're sending that resume and who you're sending it to. Question from Ella. Lots of recruiters talk about personal interests. I was wondering what you think the best way to include this in a cover letter is. So first of all, thank you, Ella. I would obviously include your personal interests in your resume, and I would put a section for extracurricular activities and list all the activities that you're involved with out of school. If I'm not quite sure what you're talking about in terms of the cover letter, but I guess I would think about if it's relevant for the job. So for example, if teamwork is one of the criteria, in your bullet point, you might say that you have developed outstanding teamwork skills through your work experience, in addition to participating at a high level or an amateur level in basketball, netball, and rowing. So that way then they know that you have got this skill, that perhaps you've developed it through work, but you may have also developed it through sport. So I think you could include it in one of your bullet points. Or the other option is you include a paragraph towards the end where you talk about the attributes and say, you know, some of your attributes and how you've developed that through extracurricular activities outside of school. So I hope that answers your question, Ella.
It does. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks, Ella. Joy, I'm currently an animation design uni student, and I've been encouraged to design my own template for my resume that fits with my personal brand. How far with stylization should I go? Okay, so again, I think, Joy, if you are going to be applying, say, to design agencies where you know, like somewhere like a design agency, it's probably unlikely that they have an applicant tracking system. Some may have them, but they're usually the larger brands, the larger corporates that have them. So if you are sending it, again, direct to a design agency and you're emailing it, I would say go for it, like be as creative as you like. It's more when you're applying for, say, a graduate program, that I would have a very standard, boring resume and then have a link to a folio in your resume. So where you could, you know, they can click on a link and it links out to your folio or design work. So Joy, I hope that also answers your question. If you do have any specific questions, I'm really happy for people to email me, or if you are on LinkedIn, please feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn so we can and then have a discussion there. I've got one more question from Nada. If you have not heard back a day after the closing date, what does that mean? So Nada, I assume you mean you've applied for a job and the closing date was, say, yesterday and you haven't heard back anything. Well, first of all, I wouldn't panic. Sometimes it could take weeks for them to get back to you. I've heard of candidates where it might be 2 or 3 months before you hear anything. So it can actually take recruiters a lot, depending on the number of applicants, it can take recruiters a long time to actually sift through resumes to get to a point where they've got a short list where they will actually call you. And I think the process at the moment is generally that they will go through all the resumes, they'll get a short list, and then you'll probably just get a call out of the blue from a recruiter, and they will possibly start to ask you some questions. You know, why are you interested in the role? You know, what experience have you got? What would be your salary expectations? So sometimes this is like, you might be at the supermarket, or you might be, you know, about to go to the gym or in a gym session when you take this call. So I guess my first piece of advice would be, don't feel like you have to speak to them right then. So if you are in a situation where you're at a train platform and it's really noisy, or you just feel like you're not prepared, I would just say to them, look, I'm really sorry, I'm just about to jump on a train or go into a gym session. Can I, call you back in half an hour, or can you call me back? And that way you can compose yourself and think about how you might answer some of those questions. And Nada, like if you have applied for a job, I would always be ready, like in case so years ago, they would call you and say, are you available to come in for an interview on this date? Now they do what we call like a phone screen. So they'll ring you out of the blue, ask you some questions. And this isn't for formal graduate programs. This would be more like applying for a casual job anywhere. So the formal programs, you would usually get an email. But the phone screening, they're really just seeing whether you've got the communication skills and the right motivations. Also, I guess it's also a way where they can distinguish whether you are someone that is underqualified or overqualified. So if you are applying for jobs, I would start preparing responses to those questions, like tell us about yourself, why are you interested in the role, what are you looking for out of a role? Like start to think about those responses so that if they do call you out of the blue, that you're actually a little bit prepared to answer those questions. Because I find often people aren't prepared because they think they're going to be invited to a formal interview and that they will then have the opportunity to prepare for that. So Nada, just relax. It could be weeks before you hear back. So certainly don't stress a day after the closing date, because it might be even a week. It would be great I think they'd be quite efficient if you heard back in a week, within the week. So it can take you need to be very patient when you're job searching. Question from Annie, LinkedIn, when should grads set up a LinkedIn profile? Look, Annie, I think even year 12 students should be setting up a LinkedIn profile towards the end of their schooling. I think LinkedIn is, and I'll be talking about this on the 4th of August, it is such a great tool for you to start learning about your industry. You don't have to have a lot of information in your profile. So I would always recommend you have a nice professional photo. When I say professional, you don't have to pay someone to take it. It just needs to look professional. So you do want to look like the people that you hope to work with in the future. So no, sunglasses on the head, no photos at the races or anything like that. It needs to look like reasonably corporate, unless you're a creative and you want to look a bit more creative, that's fine. So LinkedIn, you can start following companies that you might like to work for in the future. You can follow people as well. Like if there's some people out there that really inspire you, you can follow them. And so that it's, just like Facebook, you get news about different companies, jobs that they're hiring. You can start connecting with people in that industry and just say, look, you've been following their company and you're hoping to work in that industry in the future. I'd love to connect with you. People are really open to connecting with young people and helping them with their careers. And that's what LinkedIn is all about. So look, Annie, I would go for it if I was you. If you want to send me a LinkedIn message, and I'm very happy to have a look over it for you and just let you know if there's anything you've missed. But it's pretty intuitive. Like if you can set up a Facebook account, you can set up a LinkedIn account. And we'll chat a lot more about LinkedIn in the next session. Okay, well, we might leave it at that, but feel free to email me if you do think of anything afterwards, or if it's about LinkedIn, you can save it for our session on the 4th of August.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining in tonight. It's been, hopefully you've found it useful, and if you do have any questions, you know where we are.